legitimate and a murder that left the entire community reeling. You ready to unpack this one?
Oh, absolutely. And what really makes this one stick with you is how it just shatters that whole perfect suburbia image. You know, the kind you always see in these stories.
You hit the nail on the head. So let's start with our victim. Brandon Thibodaux, just 18 years old. This kid had a bright future ahead of him. He loved cars, took care of his blind grandmother, and seemed to be head over heels for his high school sweetheart, Lee Gerrard.
You know, it's crucial we get a clear picture of Brandon's life because his story, how it ends so tragically, it really exposes how even the most idyllic places can have these dark currents flowing beneath the surface.
Exactly. And the people closest to Brandon become the prime suspects. Lee, her mom Paulette, and her dad Richard. We're talking a family ripped apart by secrets and ultimately by violence.
And that business you mentioned, beauty buys, that's a huge piece of this puzzle. Paulette, Lee's mom, was the mastermind behind it. It was one of those multi-level marketing schemes, an MLM, promising women, you know, financial freedom and all that. But let me tell you, there was a much darker side to this whole operation.
Ooh, right. For those who might not be familiar with MLMs, it's basically a business model where you have these independent distributors making money by selling products, but also by recruiting new people into the network. They get commissions on their own sales and on the sales of everyone they recruit.
And that's where things get ethically shaky, fast. Because suddenly the focus shifts from actually selling products to just roping in more and more people, often with these totally unrealistic promises of riches and success.
Okay, so we've got this complex family dynamic, and Paulette is right at the center of it all. Attractive, successful, but there's this weird competitive vibe between her and her own daughter, Lee. It was almost like she saw Lee as a rival, not just for, attention from men, but like for her youth, for her energy.
Exactly. And that dynamic, that tension simmering beneath the surface, it becomes a key piece of this puzzle when you consider the affair Paulette was having.
This is where it gets really wild. Paulette, Lee's mother, was secretly involved with Brandon, her daughter's boyfriend.
Talk about a tangled web, right?
Right. And when you add in her involvement in this potentially predatory MLM, you start seeing a pattern. Manipulation, control. Paulette seems like someone who needs to have power over others, whether it's her daughter, the women she brings into beauty buys, or even Brandon himself.
It's like she was living this double life, you know? Successful businesswoman, devoted mom, but underneath, this desperate need for validation, for control. And it seems like that need for control only intensified as her MLM started falling apart. Remember, these schemes, they rely on constant recruitment to keep the money coming in. If people stop joining, or if the products don't sell, the whole thing can implode.
So picture this. Paulette's business is teetering on the edge, her secret relationship with Brandon is a ticking time bomb, and the cracks in her perfect image are starting to show.
And this is where the stage is set for what happens next. It's August 12th, 2021, and the illusion of normalcy in Metairie is about to shatter. Brandon's grandmother, Mabel, she realizes something's wrong, terribly wrong. She hasn't heard from him all morning, which is totally unlike him, especially since she depends on him for everything.
And remember, Mabel's blind. She can't just go check on Brandon herself. She manages to contact her neighbor, Mrs. Dupree, and she rushes over to see what's going on.
And what she finds is horrific. Brandon's room is a bloodbath, stabbed multiple times, savage. It's clear from the scene that this wasn't some random act of violence. This was personal. This was driven by rage.
Yeah, the brutality of it all immediately told the Metairie police that this was personal. This was fueled by some intense emotion.
Right from the get-go, the police zeroes in on Paulette Gerrard. They see the potential motives, the affair, the financial stress from her business potentially collapsing, her personality, which seems volatile to say the least. It all points to her.
They bring her in for questioning, and she arrives completely composed. Hair perfect, makeup flawless. But as they start digging into her relationship with Brandon, that carefully constructed facade, it starts to crumble.
And this is where you see the skill of those detectives. They know how to read people, their body language, the inconsistencies in their stories, and they know how to apply just the right amount of pressure to get to the truth.
They confront her with the evidence of the affair, and she breaks down, sobbing, claiming she loved Brandon, would never hurt him.
But the detectives, they've seen this before. The tears, the desperate attempts to shift the blame. They know they're dealing with a master manipulator.
And think about Lee, Brandon's girlfriend. She's just 18. Imagine finding out your boyfriend is having an affair with your own mother. The betrayal, the grief, the anger, it's an overwhelming mix of emotions.
And yeah, when the police question Lee, she's understandably a wreck. She tells them about discovering the affair just days before Brandon's murder. She claims she was at a sleepover with a friend, Taylor, the night it happened.
But there are gaps in her alibi, time she can't account for. And the intensity of her emotions, the swings from sorrow to anger, well, they raise some red flags for the detectives.
Then we have the third piece of this family drama, Richard Gerrard, Lee's dad, Paulette's husband. He's a high-profile attorney in Metairie, the kind of guy who values appearances above everything else. Successful career, but it seems his family life, well, that was a different story altogether.
When they question him, he insists he had a good relationship with both his wife and daughter, admits that his marriage was, complicated, but says they had a strong bond.
Yeah, and he claims he knew nothing about the affair until after Brandon's death. But his whole demeanor, so detached, hesitant to get into the details, It all feels very calculated, like he's protecting something or someone.
The detectives aren't buying it. They have this feeling that Richard knows more than he's letting on. But they need something solid, something to crack this case wide open.
And that's where things get really interesting. A few days into the investigation, they get an anonymous tip, a call that leads them straight to Paulette's office.
And what they find inside, it isn't just an office, it's a shrine to Brandon. Walls plastered with his photos, many of them, well, suggestive. There are notes, candles, trinkets. It's like stepping inside the mind of an obsessed fan.
It's a deeply unsettling discovery. Makes you question Paulette's state of mind. Was this love or something far more sinister?
And this disturbing find wasn't the only secret Paulette was hiding. As they dig deeper into beauty buys, the ugly truth behind her so-called empire starts to unravel.
This wasn't just a business, it was a predatory scheme, preying on vulnerable women, a lot of them single mothers, desperate for financial security.
Paulette was exploiting them, convincing them to pour their life savings into products they couldn't sell, leaving them in crippling debt. It was a house of cards built on
And
lies.
suddenly, the pieces start to fall into place. Paulette's world was imploding, her business about to be exposed, the affair a ticking time bomb. She was losing control.
The pressure, the desperation, it all culminated in that horrifying act of violence.
The motive was clear. The evidence was piling up. It was time to bring Paulette Gerrard to justice. They had her, mountains of evidence piling up against Paulette. They even found her DNA at the crime scene. So the police, they decided it was time. Early morning, August 21st, 2021, they show up at her doorstep to make the arrest.
Wow, I can only imagine the shock. This was Paulette Gerrard, the picture of success, respectability, and now facing a murder charge.
It was huge. The whole community was in shock. I mean, the Gerrard home, it was like a symbol of, making it. And suddenly it became this grim reminder that, things aren't always what they seem.
And for Brandon's family, this was just the beginning of a long, painful journey towards justice. Mabel, his grandmother, she relied on him for everything. And now she had to face losing him in such a brutal way.
The trial started November 8th, 2021 at the Jefferson Parish Courthouse. Assistant District Attorney Mark Tremblay led the prosecution. He was known for, being sharp, detail-oriented.
Right, and Tremblay, he presented a pretty compelling case. He argued that Paulette, driven by jealousy, by obsession, and by the fear of losing everything, snapped, that she murdered Brandon in a fit of rage.
The prosecution brought in all these expert witnesses. Forensic specialists who talked about the bloodstains of the crime scene, their analysis, it pointed to a struggle. Brandon had tried to fight back.
And the evidence against Paulette, it was overwhelming. The DNA, that shrine to Brandon in her office, the testimonies from all those women she'd exploited through beauty buys, it was all there.
But Paulette's lawyer, Charles Chuck Lemoyne, he was known for, being able to dismantle even the strongest cases. And he wasn't giving up easy. He tried to find holes in the prosecution's story, saying the evidence was all circumstantial. Maybe someone else did it.
Yeah, he even tried to cast doubt on Lee's alibi, highlighting inconsistencies in her story about that night. He even tried to paint Paulette as this loving mother, saying she'd never hurt her daughter's boyfriend.
But the jury, they had all the evidence, all those chilling details about Paulette's obsession with Brandon. It was just too much. They weren't convinced.
It must have been so hard for Brandon's family. His grandmother, Mabel, she sat through every single day of that trial, clutching a photo of Brandon and Lee, forced to confront, the betrayal from her mom, her boyfriend. I can't imagine.
It took 2 weeks. 2 weeks of testimony, deliberation, and finally, the jury reached a verdict. Guilty of first-degree murder.
On December 1st, 2021, Paulette Gerrard was sentenced to life in prison. No possibility of parole. Harsh, but a lot of people felt it was justified given what she'd done.
Paulette's conviction, it marked the end of the trial. But this case, it had ripple effects. Beauty buys, exposed as this predatory scheme, it got shut down.
And Richard Gerrard, this once respected attorney, he retreated from public life. His reputation tarnished by the whole scandal.
And Lee, she'd lost her boyfriend. And then to realize what her own mother had done, it was devastating. She ended up leaving Metairie, trying to start over, to heal, far away from the shadow of this tragedy.
This case, it really shook Metairie. It shattered that sense of safety, of normalcy. It was a wake-up call that even in places like that, in those seemingly perfect neighborhoods, darkness can be hiding right beneath the surface.
And as we dig into this case, we see these unsettling truths about ambition, about obsession, about what people will do to hold on to control. Paulette, she chased wealth and power, and it destroyed her. It destroyed lives, left a trail of pain in its wake.
And it makes you think, doesn't it, about our own responsibility. Were there signs people missed? Could this have been prevented?
Yeah. It's like this stark reminder that even in families that seem normal, secrets can fester, and desires, they can turn deadly. It's a call to be more observant, to trust our gut feelings, and to speak up when something feels wrong.
The story of Brandon Thibodaux, it reminds us that evil can wear a mask, that it can blend in, hide in plain sight, just waiting for the chance to strike.
It forces us to look deeper, to question what we think we know, and to face that darker side of human nature, the side that can lead to unthinkable acts of violence.
As we wrap up our deep dive into this case, it leaves us with this profound sadness for Brandon, for the life he could have had, the dreams, the potential, all cut short.
That house, the Gerrard home, once it was like the place to be, a symbol of, success. But after the trial, it just sat there empty, like this eerie reminder of everything that happened. Proof that even behind those perfect walls, things can go very, very wrong.
Yeah. And A beauty buys. Paulette's whole empire built on, well, let's be honest, lies and manipulation. It all came crashing down after the scandal.
Think about those women. They were promised so much. Wealth, independence. And they were left with nothing. Some lost their savings, their homes, all because they trusted Paulette.
The local news, especially WWL-TV, they covered it all, you know. Every detail from the moment they found Brandon to Paulette's arrest, the trial, everything. It became this cautionary tale, this stark reminder that things aren't always what they seem, especially when it comes to greed and ambition.
This case, it even stuck with the detectives. Michael Duvall, Renee Martinez, they'd seen it all, right? But this one, it got to them. I mean, the brutality, the tangled relationships, to realize someone they'd actually spoken to could do something like that.
It makes you think about everyone who works in law enforcement. They see the worst of humanity day after day. It's got to take a toll. And yet they keep going. They keep fighting for justice for the victims.
It makes you wonder, doesn't it? What can we, the people watching this unfold, what can we learn from this?
Well, it definitely shows how important it is to be vigilant, to trust your gut, to pay attention to those little signs that something might be off. It's so easy to just focus on appearances, to think everything's fine because it looks fine. But this case, it reminds us that things aren't always what they seem.
It's also a warning about unchecked ambition, about chasing wealth and power no matter the cost. Paulette, she was so driven, but look where it got her. She destroyed herself and everyone around her.
It shows you that success built on lies, it never lasts. True success, it has to come from integrity, from empathy, from doing the right thing. And those are all things Paulette, well, she seemed to forget about them in her climb to the top.
In the end, it all comes back to Brandon. The life he could have had, the dreams, the potential, all stolen from him.
His story is a reminder that life is precious, to hold on to the people we love, and to speak out against injustice whenever we see it.
It's also a chance for us to learn more about those multi-level marketing schemes, how they work, the dangers, to understand obsession, control, and how vital it is to build relationships on trust and respect.
This deep dive, it's been intense, unsettling. But by looking into these dark corners of human behavior, by understanding what leads to these tragedies, maybe we can start to recognize the warning signs. Maybe we can step in and help prevent something like this from happening again.
And even though this case is so dark, there's still hope, resilience. The human spirit is strong. It can heal, it can grow, it can find meaning, even after immense loss.
Thank you all for joining us on this journey, for taking this deep dive with us. Let's remember Brandon Thibodaux. Let his story remind us to live fully, to fight for what's right, and to work towards a world where these tragedies are no longer part of our reality.